The massive throne room stretched out like a dark cathedral. Emperor Zethrak sat on his crystal chair, looking at the glowing screens that covered the walls. Each screen showed numbers. Numbers of planets destroyed, numbers of species wiped out, numbers of children killed. His skin was black like space itself. He had 4 arms, each ending in claws that could crush steel. His eyes glowed red in the darkness. He was 12 feet tall and had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. Every living thing in 17 star systems bowed to him or died. Today was special. Today the humans were finished. General Vextar walked into the room. His metal boots made sharp sounds on the crystal floor. He carried a tablet with the final report from Earth. "My Emperor," Vextar said, bowing low. "The human world is complete." Zethrak nodded slowly. He touched one of the screens with a claw. Numbers appeared in bright red letters. Cities destroyed 2,847. Adult humans taken for work camps 892,156. Children eliminated 5,631. "Excellent work," Zethrak said. His voice was deep and cold. "The humans fought harder than most, but they are weak. All species are weak." The Emperor stood and walked to the big window. Outside, space was full of his ships. Thousands of them. Each one carried weapons that could destroy planets. Each one flew the flag of his empire. "Sir," Vextar continued, "there is one small matter." Zethrak turned. His red eyes focused on the general. "Speak." "Our scouts found a small ship. It was hiding in an asteroid field near the human world. Inside was one human child. The ship was damaged. The child was alone." The Emperor frowned. His empire was built on perfection. No mistakes. No survivors. When he decided a species should die, they all died. Every single one. How did we miss this ship? Zethrak asked. "The ship was very small, my lord." "It had no weapons. Our scanners almost missed it. The child inside was unconscious. They are very young." Zethrak walked back to his throne. He sat down and thought. In 3,000 years, this had never happened before. There were never survivors. His fleets were too good. His plans were too perfect. "Where is this child now?" he asked. "In the prison cells, my lord, waiting for your orders." The Emperor looked at his claws. They were sharp and strong. He had used them to kill many enemies. He had built his empire by being stronger than everyone else, by being more willing to do what others could not do. "I want to see this child," Zethrak said. Vextar looked surprised. "My lord? It would be faster to simply eliminate them." "Why waste time?" Zethrak stood again. His red eyes burned brighter. "Because I want to understand how this happened. I want to know how one small human ship escaped my perfect plan. Then I will kill the child myself." The general bowed. "Of course, my lord." "Should I bring the child here?" "No," Zethrak said. "I will go to them. I want to see this survivor in their cage. I want them to know there is no hope." The Emperor walked out of the throne room. His footsteps echoed in the long hallways. His ship was huge. It was called the Terminus. It was like a floating city in space. Millions of soldiers lived on it. Thousands of weapons covered its surface. It was home to the most feared ruler in the galaxy. As he walked, Zethrak thought about the humans. They had been different from other species. Most aliens begged for mercy when his fleets arrived. They offered him gold or technology. They promised to serve him if he let them live. The humans had done something else. They had fought. Every human city had fought until the end. Every human soldier had died fighting. Even when it was clear they could not win, they kept fighting. It was strange. It was also stupid. Fighting only made their death take longer. It did not change the outcome. Zethrak always won. He had the bigger ships. He had the better weapons. He had the stronger army. But the humans had fought anyway. The Emperor reached the prison level. The hallways here were darker. The air was colder. Thousands of cells lined the walls. Most were empty now. His enemies did not live long enough to need long prison stays. He walked to cell 5731. The number made him smile. It matched the count of human children his soldiers had eliminated. It seemed right that the last human child would have that cell number. The guard outside the cell snapped to attention. "My lord, the prisoner is inside." Zethrak waved him away. "Leave us alone." The guard ran down the hallway. The Emperor touched a button on the wall. The cell door became clear instead of solid metal. He could see inside. The child was small, much smaller than he expected. They sat on the floor in the corner of the cell. Their clothes were torn and dirty. Their hair was brown and messy. They looked up when the door became clear. Zethrak expected to see fear. He expected tears. He expected begging. All his enemies looked at him the same way. They saw death in his red eyes. They knew their time was over, but this child looked different. Their eyes were dark and calm. They did not cry. They did not shake. They just looked at him. The Emperor felt something strange. For just a moment he was not sure what to do. This had never happened before. Every living thing feared him. Every creature in the galaxy knew what he was. But this small human child just sat there, looking at him like he was just another person. Zethrak opened the cell door. The metal slid away with a soft sound. He stepped inside. The cell was tiny compared to his great size. His head almost touched the ceiling. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. The child nodded slowly. "You are the one who killed everyone. I am Emperor Zethrak. I rule 17 star systems. I have destroyed 1,000 worlds. I have ended 1,000,000 species." The child said nothing. They just kept looking at him with those calm, dark eyes. "I killed your family," Zethrak continued. "I killed your friends. I killed everyone you ever knew. I burned your cities. I turned your world into ash and dust." Still the child said nothing. The Emperor felt angry. This was not how it was supposed to work. Prisoners were supposed to beg. They were supposed to cry and plead for their lives. They were supposed to fear him. "You are the last human in the galaxy," Zethrak said. His voice got louder. "When I kill you, your entire species will be gone forever. Nothing will remain. No one will remember you existed." The child tilted their head slightly, like they were thinking about something. Like they were listening to a sound he could not hear. "Soon," the Emperor continued, "you will die, just like the other 5,731 children of your kind. Your death will complete my work here." For the first time the child spoke. Their voice was soft and small, but in the tiny cell Zethrak heard every word clearly. "What will you do then?" the child asked. The question surprised him. "What do you mean?" "After you kill me. After all the humans are gone." "What will you do then?" Zethrak frowned. It was a strange question. "I will find another species to conquer. I will continue building my empire. And after that, I will conquer more worlds. And after that?" The Emperor felt confused. Why was this child asking such things? "I will rule the galaxy. I will be the strongest being that ever lived." The child nodded like they understood. Then they asked one more question. "Will you be happy?" Zethrak stared at the small human. No one had ever asked him that before. In 3,000 years of conquest and killing, happiness had never been part of his plans. He did not answer. He could not answer. The child just kept looking at him with those calm, knowing eyes. Emperor Zethrak left the cell without saying another word. The child's question followed him down the dark hallways. "Will you be happy?" The words seemed to echo off the metal walls. He had never thought about happiness before. Happiness was for weak creatures. Happiness was for slaves and servants. Emperors did not need happiness. They needed power. They needed fear. They needed victory. But the question would not leave his mind. The next morning, Zethrak sat in his private study. The room was filled with trophies from his conquests. Skulls of alien kings sat on silver shelves. Crystals from destroyed planets glowed in glass cases. Weapons from fallen armies hung on the walls like art. Each trophy told a story of victory. Each one proved his strength. Each one showed the galaxy that Emperor Zethrak was unstoppable. General Vextar entered the room. He carried a new report. "My lord, the fleets are ready for the next mission. The Kepler system awaits your orders." Zethrak nodded, but he did not take the report. Instead, he stared at one particular trophy. It was a small wooden toy, a doll made by some alien child on a world he had destroyed 50 years ago. He had kept it as a reminder that he showed mercy to no one. "My lord?" Vexitar asked. "Should I give the attack order?" "Not yet," Zethrak said. "I want to speak with the human prisoner again." The general looked confused. "Sir, would it not be easier to simply end this? The child serves no purpose alive." The Emperor turned his red eyes toward his second-in-command. "I will decide what serves my purposes. Vexitar bowed quickly. Of course, my lord, forgive me. Bring the child to my personal chambers. I want to question them more carefully. Sir, is that wise? Your private chambers contain many sensitive items. Zethrak smiled. His smile was not pleasant. Exactly. I want this human to see the full scope of what I have accomplished. I want them to understand the size of their defeat. An hour later, 2 guards brought the child to the Emperor's chambers. The room was enormous. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadow. The walls were covered with displays showing maps of the galaxy. Red dots marked every world Zethrak controlled. There were thousands of them. The child stood in the center of the room. They looked very small, surrounded by all the symbols of imperial power. They turned slowly, looking at everything. Their face showed no fear, only curiosity. Do you see? Zethrak asked. He gestured at the walls. Every red dot is a world under my control. Every green dot is a world I have destroyed. Every blue dot is a world that serves my empire. The child continued looking around. Their eyes stopped on a display case near the window. Inside were small items from destroyed civilizations. Toys, pictures, books, things that had belonged to families before Zethrak ended their worlds. These are remembrances, the Emperor explained. Pieces of species that no longer exist. I keep them so I will never forget what I have accomplished. The child walked closer to the display case. They put their small hand against the glass. Inside, a teddy bear sat next to a crystal flower. Next to those was a child's drawing of their family. They all had children, the child said quietly. Yes, Zethrak replied. And I eliminated every one of them. Just as I eliminated your kind. The child turned away from the display. They looked directly at the Emperor. Why? It was a simple question, but it hit Zethrak like a punch. What do you mean, why? Why did you kill them? Why did you destroy their worlds? Why did you take everything away from them? The Emperor frowned. No one had ever asked him to explain his actions before. His power was explanation enough. His strength was all the reason he needed. Because I could, he said finally. Because I am stronger. Because the galaxy belongs to the strong. But why did you want the galaxy? Again, the question surprised him. To rule it, to control it, to prove that I am the greatest being that ever lived. The child sat down on the floor. They crossed their legs and looked up at him. Did it work? What do you mean? Do you feel like the greatest being that ever lived? Zethrak opened his mouth to say yes. Of course he was the greatest. He ruled 17 star systems. He commanded millions of soldiers. He had destroyed entire species with a word, but the word yes would not come out. I am the most powerful, he said instead. That is not the same thing, the child replied. The Emperor felt angry again. This small human was confusing him. They were making him think about things that did not matter, things that had nothing to do with power or conquest. You are trying to trick me, Zethrak said. You think your words can save you, but nothing can save you. I have killed billions of creatures stronger than you. The child shook their head. I am not trying to save myself. Then what are you doing? I am trying to understand you. Zethrak laughed. It was a harsh sound that echoed off the chamber walls. Understand me? I am simple to understand. I am power. I am strength. I am death to my enemies. No, the child said. You are sad. The word hit the Emperor like a lightning bolt. Sad? He was not sad. He was victorious. He was feared across the galaxy. He was the ruler of everything he could see. I am not sad, he said, but his voice sounded strange, even to himself. You keep pieces of dead worlds in glass boxes, the child said. You sit alone in a big room full of reminders of things you destroyed. You have millions of soldiers but no friends. You have conquered the galaxy, but you asked me what you should do next. Zethrak felt something crack inside his chest, something he had not felt for 3,000 years, something he had buried under layers of anger and violence and conquest. You do not know what you are talking about, he whispered. The child stood up. They walked closer to him. The Emperor could have killed them with one swipe of his claws. But he did not move. When you destroyed my world, the child said, did it make you feel better? Yes, it proved my power. But did it make you feel better inside? In your heart? Zethrak's hands began to shake. No one had ever asked him about his heart before. No one had ever suggested that what he felt inside mattered. I do not have a heart, he said. The child reached out and touched his hand. Their fingers were so small compared to his claws, but their touch was warm. Everyone has a heart, they said, even you. For a moment, the Emperor felt something he had not experienced in 3 millennia. He felt what it was like to be touched with kindness instead of fear. He felt what it was like to have someone look at him and see more than just death and destruction. Then he jerked his hand away. Guards, he shouted. Take the prisoner back, to their cell. The guards rushed in and grabbed the child. As they dragged them toward the door, the child looked back at Zethrak. I will still be here when you are ready to talk, they said. The door closed. The Emperor was alone again with his trophies and his maps and his reminders of everything he had destroyed. But for the first time in 3,000 years, the silence felt heavy. The emptiness felt cold, and deep in his chest, something that might have been a heart began to beat. That night, Emperor Zethrak could not sleep. He lay on his massive bed in his dark chambers staring at the ceiling. The child's words played over and over in his mind. Everyone has a heart, even you. He got up and walked to his window. Outside, the stars stretched across space like tiny lights in an endless ocean. He had conquered many of those stars. He had destroyed the life around many others. But looking at them now, he felt empty. The Emperor pressed his hand against the cold glass. His reflection looked back at him. Red eyes, black skin, 4 arms ending in claws. He looked like what he was, a weapon in the shape of a living being. But the child had touched his hand like he was just another person. Not a monster, not a destroyer of worlds, just someone who needed kindness. Zethrak shook his head. These thoughts were dangerous. They made him weak. They made him question everything he had built. He was the ruler of 17 star systems because he was strong, because he did what others could not do, because he never showed mercy. But the questions would not stop coming. 3 days passed. The Emperor tried to return to his normal routine. He reviewed fleet reports. He planned new conquests. He studied maps of star systems that did not yet belong to him. Nothing felt the same. On the 4th day, General Vextar brought urgent news. My lord, he said, entering the throne room with quick steps. We have a problem. Zethrak looked up from his strategic displays. What kind of problem? The prisoner, sir. The human child. Something strange is happening. The Emperor felt his chest tighten. Explain. The guards report that the child has not eaten in 3 days. They bring food, but the child gives it to a maintenance robot that works in the prison level. A robot? Yes, sir. An old cleaning unit. Its power systems are failing. The child has been sharing their food with it. They talk to it like it is alive. Zethrak frowned. Robots do not need food. The child seems to think this one does, my lord. They pet it and speak gently to it. The strangest part is that the robot appears to respond. It follows the child around the cell. It makes sounds like it is trying to communicate. The Emperor stood up from his throne. This made no sense. Robots were tools. They had programming, not feelings. They served functions, nothing more. There is more, sir, Vextar continued. Other maintenance robots throughout the ship have begun acting strangely. They move more slowly. They seem confused. And some of our automated systems have been having minor malfunctions. What kind of malfunctions? Doors that hesitate before opening, weapons that take longer to charge, navigation systems that pause for no reason. Nothing dangerous, but everything seems less efficient. Zethrak felt a chill run down his spine. When did this start? 3 days ago, my lord. The same day you questioned the prisoner in your chambers. The Emperor walked to his window again. His reflection stared back at him, but now he looked troubled. How could one small human child affect his entire ship? How could their presence change the way machines worked? Bring me the security recordings from the prisoner's cell, he ordered. Yes, my lord. An hour later, Zethrak sat alone in his study, watching the recordings on a large screen. He saw the child sharing their food with the cleaning robot. He watched them pet its metal surface like it was a living animal. He listened as they talked to it in soft, gentle words. "You must be lonely down here," the child said to the robot in the recording. "I know what that feels like. My friends are all gone now, but maybe we can be friends." The robot's lights blinked in what almost looked like a response. It rolled closer to the child and made soft beeping sounds. "Are you trying to talk to me?" the child asked. "I wish I could understand robot language, but I think you're trying to say something nice." The child reached out and touched the robot's metal head. "It's okay to be scared. I'm scared too, but maybe if we stay together we won't feel so alone." Zethrak stopped the recording. His hands were shaking again. He had never seen anything like this before. The child was treating a simple machine like it had feelings, like it mattered. But the strangest part was that the robot seemed to respond as if it really did have feelings. The Emperor called for his chief technician. "I want you to examine maintenance robot 7439, the one assigned to the prison level." "Yes, sir." "Is there a malfunction?" "I am not sure." "Run a complete diagnostic. Check its programming. See if anything has changed." 2 hours later, the technician returned with a confused expression. "My lord, the robot's programming is unchanged, but its behavior patterns are completely different. It moves with more purpose, its responses seem more complex. It is as if the robot has developed some kind of primitive personality." "How is that possible?" "I do not know, sir. But there is something else. The robot's power levels are higher than they should be. It should have shut down days ago, but something is keeping it running." Zethrak dismissed the technician and returned to watching the security recordings. He fast-forwarded through hours of footage, watching the child and the robot together. The child told the robot stories about Earth. They described trees and oceans and birds. They talked about their family and friends. They shared memories of birthday parties and school days and quiet evenings at home. The robot listened to every word. Its lights blinked in patterns that almost seemed like responses. Sometimes it would move closer when the child seemed sad. Sometimes it would make sounds that might have been attempts at comfort. "I miss them," the child said in one recording. "I miss my mom and dad. I miss my little brother. I miss my dog. I even miss my teacher, and I never thought I would say that." The robot rolled closer and gently bumped against the child's leg. "Thank you," the child whispered. "You're a good friend." The Emperor stopped the recording again. He felt something wet on his face and realized with shock that he was crying. He had not cried in 3,000 years. He had forgotten that he could cry. But watching this small human show kindness to a machine had broken something open inside him, something he had kept locked away for so long he had forgotten it existed. He thought about all the robots on his ship, thousands of them. They cleaned and repaired and served without question. He had never thought of them as anything more than tools. But this child saw something else. This child saw beings worthy of friendship and care. Zethrak stood up and walked to his trophy room. He looked at all the reminders of his conquests, the skulls and weapons and broken pieces of destroyed civilizations. For the first time, they did not look like symbols of power. They looked like symbols of loss, of lives ended, of stories that would never be finished. He thought about the 5,731 human children his forces had eliminated. Each one had been someone's son or daughter. Each one had friends and dreams and favorite toys. Each one had stories to tell and games to play and futures to explore, and he had taken all of that away. The Emperor fell to his knees among his trophies. The weight of what he had done crashed down on him like a collapsing star. 3,000 years of conquest, millions of deaths, countless species ended forever, all for what? To prove he was strong? To show the galaxy he could not be stopped? But strength that came from destroying others was not really strength at all. It was just fear dressed up as power. Zethrak knew what he had to do. He had to face the child again. He had to look into those calm, dark eyes and admit what he was. He had to speak the truth about himself, even if it destroyed him. Because for the first time in 3,000 years, Emperor Zethrak understood that some things were more important than power. Some things were more important than being strong. Some things were worth being destroyed. For the most important thing of all was sitting in a prison cell, sharing food with a robot and treating it like a friend. Emperor Zethrak did not sleep for the next week. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw faces. Human faces, the faces of the 5,631 children his army had killed. They looked at him with the same calm dark eyes as the child in the prison cell. He stopped eating. Food had no taste anymore. He stopped reviewing fleet reports. The numbers meant nothing now. He stopped planning new conquests. What was the point of taking more worlds when the ones he already controlled felt empty? General Vextar grew worried. "My lord, you must rest. The Empire needs your guidance." "The Empire runs itself," Zethrak replied. He stood at his window looking out at the stars. "It always has." "Sir, the fleet commanders are asking for orders. The Kepler system still awaits your decision." The Emperor turned away from the window. "Tell them to wait." "For how long, my lord?" "Until I decide what we are doing here." Vextar looked confused. "Sir, we are building the greatest empire in galactic history. We are proving that strength rules the universe, are we?" Zethrak asked. "Or are we just killing everything that makes the universe worth living in?" The general stepped back. In 30 years of service, he had never heard the Emperor question their mission. "My lord, perhaps you should speak with the medical staff." "You seem tired." "I am tired," Zethrak agreed. "I am tired of being a monster." He walked past his shocked general and headed for the prison level. He needed to see the child again. He needed to understand how someone so small could shake the foundations of his empire just by being kind to a robot. The hallways of the ship felt different now. Longer, darker. The walls seemed to press in on him. Soldiers and servants moved out of his way as always, but their fear felt heavier, more real. Had they always been this afraid of him? Had he always walked through his own ship like death itself? When he reached the prison level, he found something that made him stop in surprise. The cleaning robot was not in the child's cell. It was in the hallway outside, along with 3 other maintenance robots. They had formed a circle around the cell door like they were standing guard. "What are they doing?" Zethrak asked the guard. "I do not know, sir. They arrived an hour ago and will not move. We tried to send them back to their duties, but they ignore our commands." The Emperor looked at the robots more carefully. Their lights blinked in slow, steady patterns. They moved slightly, shifting position every few minutes, but they never left their posts around the cell. "They are protecting the child," he realized. "Sir? These machines. They are trying to protect the prisoner." The guard looked confused. "But sir, they are just robots. They do not have feelings or loyalties." Zethrak walked to the cell door. The robots turned their sensors toward him but did not move away. He could feel their attention on him, like they were judging whether he meant harm to their small friend. "Open the cell," he ordered. The guard hesitated. "Sir, the robots are in the way." "They will move." The Emperor stepped closer to the circle of machines. For a moment they held their positions. Then slowly they rolled aside to create a path to the cell door. But they did not go far. They stayed close enough to watch. The cell door slid open. Inside, the child sat on their small bed, drawing on the wall with a piece of metal they had found somewhere. The drawing showed stick figures holding hands under a sun. One figure was much larger than the others. "Hello," the child said without looking up. "I wondered when you would come back." Zethrak stepped into the cell. It felt even smaller than before. "You have made friends with my machines." "They were lonely," the child replied, still drawing. "Everyone needs friends. They are robots. They do not feel loneliness." The child finally looked at him. "Are you sure about that?" The Emperor had no answer. A week ago, he would have been certain. Robots were tools. They followed programming. They had no inner lives. But watching them form a protective circle around the cell had shaken that certainty. "Why do you care about them?" he asked. "Why wouldn't I?" The child replied. "They work hard. They try to help. They never hurt anyone. They deserve kindness. But they are just machines." The child put down their piece of metal and stood up. So, they do not matter. "Everything matters," the child said simply. "Every person, every animal, every plant, every robot. Everything in the universe matters." Zethrak felt that crack in his chest widen. "That is impossible. If everything mattered, then—" He stopped. He could not finish the thought. "Then what?" the child asked gently. "Then I have destroyed things that mattered. Then I have spent 3,000 years making the universe smaller and emptier and worse." The child nodded. Yes. The simple agreement hit the Emperor like a physical blow. He stumbled backward and hit the cell wall. His legs felt weak. His chest felt tight, but I had to, he whispered. I had to be strong. I had to prove that I was the most powerful being in the galaxy. Why? That question again. The one he could never answer properly. Because if I was not the strongest, then someone stronger would come and destroy me, kill me, take everything I had built. And would that be bad? Zethrak stared at the child. Of course it would be bad. Death is the worst thing that can happen. The child tilted their head. Is it worse than never having lived at all? What do you mean? All those children you killed. All those species you ended. You took away their chance to live. You decided that your life was more important than theirs. The Emperor felt like the cell was spinning around him. They were weak. The strong survive. The weak die. That is the law of nature. No, the child said. That is the law of fear. Fear? You were afraid of dying, so you decided to kill everyone else first. You were afraid of being weak, so you made everyone else weaker. You were afraid of being alone, so you made sure no one else could be together. Each word felt like a knife in Zethrak's chest, because each word was true. But if I had not done those things, I would have died long ago. My enemies would have killed me. Maybe, the child agreed, but maybe you would have lived a different kind of life. Maybe you would have made friends instead of enemies. Maybe you would have built things instead of destroying them. Maybe you would have been happy. That word again. Happy. I do not know how to be happy. Zethrak whispered. You could learn. The Emperor looked at the child's drawing on the wall, the stick figures holding hands under the sun. One large, several small. Is that supposed to be us? He asked. It could be, the child replied, if you wanted it to be. Zethrak reached out with one of his clawed hands and touched the drawing. The metal wall was cold under his fingers, but the simple picture felt warm. I have done terrible things, he said. Yes. I have killed billions of innocent beings. Yes. I have made the universe a darker, more frightening place. Yes. Each admission felt like another weight added to his shoulders, but strangely, speaking the truth out loud also felt like a relief, like he was finally putting down a burden he had carried for too long. I do not know how to fix what I have done, he said. You cannot fix it, the child replied, but you can stop making it worse. How? The child walked over to him and looked up at his towering form. You can choose to be different. Starting now. It is not that simple. Yes, it is. The Emperor knelt down so he was closer to the child's level. What would I do? How would I rule an empire without fear and violence? Maybe you do not need to rule an empire at all. The thought was so shocking that Zethrak nearly fell over. Not rule, not command, not control everything around him. But if I do not rule, then who will? The child smiled. It was the first time he had seen them smile. Maybe everyone can rule themselves. That is chaos. No, the child said. That is freedom. Outside the cell, the maintenance robots beeped softly to each other like they were having a conversation. Zethrak listened to their electronic voices and realized that maybe they had always been talking. Maybe he had just never bothered to listen. I am afraid, he admitted. I know, the child said, but being afraid is okay. Everyone is afraid sometimes, even you, especially me. But being afraid does not mean you have to hurt people. It just means you need help. The Emperor looked at this small human who had survived the destruction of their entire species, who shared food with lonely robots who offered kindness to the being who had killed everyone they loved. Will you help me? He asked. The child reached out and took his massive clawed hand in both of their small ones. Yes, they said, but first you have to forgive yourself. Zethrak shook his head. I cannot. What I have done is unforgivable. The child squeezed his hand gently. Everything is forgivable, even you. And then in that small prison cell surrounded by protective robots, the Emperor of 17 star systems heard the word that would change everything. But it was not the child who spoke it. The word came from Emperor Zethrak's own lips, spoken so quietly that at first he was not sure he had said it at all. Forgiveness. The child's eyes widened slightly. What did you say? Zethrak looked down at his clawed hands. The hands that had killed so many. The hands that had built an empire on suffering and fear. I said forgiveness. You said everything is forgivable. Even me. Yes, the child whispered. Then The Emperor's voice broke. I forgive myself. The moment he spoke those words, something extraordinary happened. The lights in the cell grew brighter. The maintenance robots outside began beeping in harmony, like they were singing. Throughout the massive ship, every screen flickered. Every automated system paused for just a moment, as if the entire vessel was taking a deep breath. Zethrak felt the change inside himself too. The weight that had pressed down on his chest for 3,000 years suddenly lifted. The anger that had burned in his heart like a constant fire went out. The fear that had driven him to destroy everything beautiful in the galaxy finally let him go. He began to cry. Not the single tear from before, but deep, shaking sobs that came from somewhere so deep inside him that he had forgotten it existed. He cried for the children he had killed. He cried for the species he had ended. He cried for the beauty he had destroyed and the love he had made impossible. But most of all, he cried for the 3,000 years he had spent being afraid. The child moved closer and put their small arms around his massive neck. They could barely reach, but they held him as he cried. They did not say anything. They just held him and let him feel what he had refused to feel for so long. When the tears finally stopped, Zethrak felt empty. But it was a good empty. Like a poison had been drained out of him. Like a wound had finally been cleaned. "What do I do now?" he asked. "Whatever you think is right," the child replied. "I do not know what is right anymore." "Yes, you do. You have always known. You just forgot how to listen to yourself." Zethrak stood up slowly. His legs felt strange, like he was learning to walk all over again. "I should free my prisoners. That sounds right. I should stop my fleets from attacking new worlds. That sounds right too. I should try to help the people I have hurt." The child smiled again. "Now you are starting to remember." The Emperor walked to the cell door. The maintenance robots were still there, waiting patiently. He knelt down and looked at the one the child had befriended. "Thank you," he said to the machine. "Thank you for taking care of my friend when I could not." The robot's lights blinked in what could only be described as happiness. Zethrak stood and walked out of the cell. The child followed him. Together they made their way through the ship's corridors. Word spread quickly that the Emperor was walking through the ship with the human prisoner. Soldiers and servants gathered to watch, confused and worried. They reached the main communication center. General Vextar was waiting there, along with several other senior officers. "My lord," Vextar said carefully, "what are your orders regarding the Kepler system?" "Cancel the attack," Zethrak replied. "Sir?" "Send a message to all fleet commanders. All attacks are canceled. All conquest operations are to stop immediately." The officers looked at each other in confusion. "My lord, what about the Empire?" Zethrak looked out through the communication center's large window. His ship stretched across space like a cloud of metal death. Each one carried enough weapons to destroy planets. Each one was ready to follow his orders without question. "Send another message," he said, "to every world in our empire. Tell them they are free." General Vextar stepped forward. "Sir, I must protest. If we release our control, there will be chaos, rebellion. Our enemies will attack us. Then we will face that when it comes," Zethrak replied. "But we will not rule through fear anymore." "My lord, this is madness. The empire will collapse." "Good," the Emperor said. "Let it collapse. Let something better take its place." He turned to address all the officers present. "I am disbanding the Imperial fleet. Any ship that wishes to return home may do so. Any soldier who wishes to leave may go. Any world that wants independence will have it." "But sir," another officer protested, "what will you do?" Zethrak looked down at the child standing beside him. "I am going to spend the rest of my life trying to make up for what I have done. I am going to help instead of hurt. I am going to build instead of destroy." "Where will you start?" the child asked. The Emperor thought for a moment. "Earth," he said. "I will start with Earth. I will help rebuild what I destroyed." "That will take a very long time," the child pointed out. "Yes," Zethrak agreed. "It will probably take the rest of my life. Maybe longer than that. Are you prepared for that?" The Emperor looked out at his fleet one more time. Ships that had brought death to 1,000 worlds, weapons that had ended countless lives, soldiers who had followed his orders without question, because they feared him more than they feared death itself. All of it built on fear. All of it maintained by violence. All of it as empty as the space between stars. "Yes," he said. "I am ready." Over the next few hours, messages went out across the galaxy. The Zethrak Empire was dissolving itself. Conquered worlds were free to govern themselves. Slave populations were released. Prison camps were opened. Many of the ships in the fleet simply left, their crews eager to return to homes they had not seen in years. Others stayed, their captains asking to help with the rebuilding efforts. A few tried to maintain the old ways, but without the Emperor's support, they had no power to enforce their will. The galaxy began to change. Zethrak stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching the fleet scatter. The child stood beside him. Between them, the maintenance robot rolled back and forth, its lights blinking contentedly. "Are you sad to see it end?" the child asked. "No," Zethrak replied. "I am relieved. What will happen to you? I do not know. Some of the worlds I conquered will probably want revenge. Some of my former soldiers will probably try to kill me. I have made many enemies. Are you afraid?" The Emperor considered the question. A week ago, fear had controlled every decision he made. Fear of being weak, fear of being defeated, fear of being forgotten. But looking out at the stars now, with the weight of empire finally off his shoulders, he felt something he had never experienced before. He felt peace. "No," he said. "I am not afraid anymore." The child nodded. "Good. Fear makes people do terrible things." "Yes, it does." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars. Finally, the child spoke again. "What will you call yourself now?" "What do you mean?" "You were Emperor Zethrak, but you are not an emperor anymore." "What will you be?" It was a good question. For 3,000 years, his title had defined him. Emperor, ruler, destroyer, conqueror. But those words felt like clothes that no longer fit. They belonged to someone else. Someone he used to be but would never be again. "I will just be Zethrak," he said. "Just myself." "I think that is a good name," the child replied. "What about you?" "What will you do now?" The child thought for a moment. "I will help you rebuild Earth, and maybe after that we can help rebuild other worlds too." "We? If you want me to stay with you?" Zethrak felt his chest grow warm. For 3,000 years he had been surrounded by servants and soldiers and subjects, people who obeyed him because they had to, people who feared him more than they respected him. But this child was offering him something he had never had before. Someone who chose to be with him. Someone who saw what he really was and decided to stay anyway. "I would like that very much," he said. The child smiled and took his hand. Together they watched as the last of the Imperial fleet disappeared into the vastness of space. Behind them, the maintenance robot beeped softly like it was saying goodbye to the old world and hello to whatever came next. Ahead of them lay Earth. A broken planet full of ash and ruins, and memories of the dead. It would take decades to rebuild. Maybe centuries. Maybe it would never be the same as it was before. But it would be something new, something better. Something built on hope instead of fear. Something built on love instead of power. Something built by beings who had learned that the most important word in any language was not conquest or victory or strength. The most important word was forgiveness, and from that single word, everything else would grow.